Should you sell your micro strategy? Well, the world's largest bank, JP Morgan, they think so because they came out literally hours ago and they said this. They said that the rejection from the S&P 500 to allow MicroStrategy into it is going to be a massive blow to crypto treasuries. And we talked about this last week, and we also talked about the NASDAQ tightening its grip on crypto companies and even using some wording that might allow them to kick MicroStrategy out of the index into the future. Before we get into that, this week's been an interesting one because Michael, CEO of MicroStrategy, founder of MicroStrategy, has even come out and had some interesting words to say in response to his company being rejected from the S&P 500. We've got a little bit of a deep rabbit hole to cover today. Let's start off, before we get to the JP Morgan news, let's cover and have a look at what Michael said in response to his company getting rejected from this $61 trillion index.
Use Bitcoin and custody it and sell it and buy it and loan against it. If the United States government begins to hold it in a strategic reserve, the beneficiary will be America.
If you could talk to President Trump and say...
Before we have a look at what Michael Saylor would say to President Trump, I'm more interested in what he says here.
Poor's or others, or, you know, and I guess, I wonder if you think Standard & Poor's or others, or, you know, if anybody has any sort of bias towards crypto still at this point, because the S&P 500 just came out with their decisions and they chose to go with Robinhood and AppLovin over strategy. And a lot of people were kind of surprised by that. The stock actually was down a little bit. Do you think that there is a bias at any of the...
Now, again, just before we get to Michael's answer, the reason why some people were surprised that Robinhood and AppLovin were put into the S&P 500 ahead of MicroStrategy is because what the hell is AppLovin? I cannot for the life of me figure out what this company does, how it makes money, or how it's not a dating app. It just sounds like a Tinder equivalent. Have a look at this. This is kind of insane. From everything I can find out about AppLovin, is it's essentially a dating application for businesses. Now, again, that's a paraphrase. I need to be very careful with what I say in today's stream because I could get a little bit fired up by the end of it. But AppLovin is a company that most people have never, ever, ever heard about in their lives. When I first saw AppLovin getting added into the index, I thought it was our friend McLovin down below in the chat, maybe pulling a little bit of a Swiftie and starting his own publicly traded company. But again, this is why there's questions being asked to Michael, because it was nearly a shoo-in that strategy would get accepted into the S&P 500 when they're plowing $10 billion worth of profit in the last quarter of 2025. Again, there's less than 10 companies that have got $10 billion worth of profit, and strategy has the 8th largest treasury of any company. Again, before we get into the numbers, let's listen to Michael's response before I go on another AppLovin related tangent.
Or any places that come through this against a company with a lot of Bitcoin in holdings?
I don't think there's a bias. I don't think we expected to be selected on our first quarter of eligibility. We figure it'll happen at some time. There's a digital transformation in the markets. This is a brand new novel concept. Every quarter, we make new believers. We get more support from banks, from politicians, from credit rating agencies, et cetera. I think that will continue for the foreseeable future.
So I think it's kind of interesting there that Michael says that he didn't actually expect to get added into the S&P 500 on their first quarter of eligibility. Again, fair response. You know, sometimes Occam's razor, the simplest explanation, can be the easiest explanation. You don't always have to pop the tinfoil hat on like I do here on these streams, but I do just think it's strange. I think there are potentially some ulterior motives here and some ulterior reasons that we are not aware of yet as to why MicroStrategy was rejected from the S&P 500. We talked about those in our video last week. I think it's fascinating that rejecting strategy from the S&P 500 essentially gives them a moat or a monopoly on the market. They are the one Bitcoin treasury company in the NASDAQ. There are not many other companies listed on some of these publicly traded indexes. Coinbase is not really a Bitcoin treasury company, but they are listed. Again, Robinhood, not necessarily a Bitcoin treasury company, but they got added into the S&P 500 before Strategy. But Strategy remains in the NASDAQ. Again, we've covered all of that. I'm more interested in the most recent news of what happened literally hours ago. The world's largest bank, JP Morgan, came out and said this: the S&P 500 rejection of Strategy is a blow to crypto treasuries. So again, they're kind of noticing what I just laid out a moment ago. This is a blow to other crypto treasuries. This is only going to, I believe, increase the size of MicroStrategy's monopoly on the market. Today, publicly traded companies have about 1 million Bitcoin on their balance sheet, and Strategy, led by Michael Saylor, holds about 650,000 coins. This is about 65% of the total share of the Bitcoin on the balance sheet of publicly traded companies. Now, I think this ratio is actually going to rise. A lot of people are saying Metaplanet, 21. A lot of people are saying, you know, Jack Mallers' new company, they are going to overtake MicroStrategy. I am not so sure about that because of the chart I'm about to show you. What I find fascinating is that everybody is looking at Metaplanet, okay? And they're saying it's the next strategy, it's the next hot kid on the block, so to say. But if you have a look at this chart right here, this is the share price catastrophe that we can see over there in Japan. Metaplanet dumped from $16 a share to $4 a share. That is hundreds of millions of dollars of value wiped off Metaplanet. That is a 75% correction in Metaplanet. Again, a lot of people, when the price of Metaplanet or MicroStrategy or the new hot stock is pumping, I get a lot of comments in the chat saying, Luke, why don't you promote stocks? Why don't you promote these publicly traded companies? They're destroying Bitcoin. You're a Neanderthal for just holding Bitcoin. That's old, boring, and slow tech. I've been called a Neanderthal before. But again, I think it's the story of the tortoise and the hare. Bitcoin might look like the tortoise in the short run, but we all know what happens to the hare. Again, be very careful of these high-flying stocks. That is something I will say. And everybody right now is wondering, okay, Metaplanet looks like this. Should I sell my MicroStrategy? Kind of looks a little bit similar here on the short time frames. Again, I'm never going to make recommendations on what you should do with your own money. I always tell you, I have no idea where the price of Bitcoin or any stock is going in the short term. But what I will say is that I am long-term incredibly bullish on MicroStrategy. I have, again, written many articles on MicroStrategy going back to 2021, making the case that Michael Saylor will be the richest person in the world. And I stand by those calls. I think Michael and MicroStrategy have really discovered this infinite money glitch. It is a flywheel, and they are the monopoly on the market. And I think what we're beginning to see here in the race of Bitcoin treasury companies is this winner-take-all dynamic. To illustrate that, I'm going to try to pull up a chart and show you guys what I think is really interesting here. Because when we start to look at the competition and these other Bitcoin treasury companies and where they are in comparison to MicroStrategy, I think we're going to see some really interesting things. And again, I think having a look at a couple of these charts is going to help to explain and answer the question that I posed to you guys in the title of today's video. Should you sell MicroStrategy? I mean, everybody's wondering that. And I do think it's kind of interesting that right now, Strategy is not dumping. Again, they got rejected from the S&P 500 last week. And what did I say last week? Typically, when stocks fail to crash on bad news, again, I don't know what's going to happen in the short term, but maybe you've ran out of sellers. Maybe, just maybe, that's the bottom. I don't know, but I have noticed other similarities here. And the same is true for stocks that don't go up on good news. Typically, maybe you have just ran out of buyers. Again, I want to zoom in and show you guys what I think is interesting here on the daily chart of MicroStrategy. So the news of them being rejected from the $61 trillion market, the S&P 500, happened here. It was last Friday. Have you noticed something about the stock? Again, it's gone sideways. It could crash tomorrow. Who knows? I honestly have no idea. But what I do think is interesting is that it didn't dump the day after being rejected from the S&P 500. I honestly thought that maybe it would have dumped after getting rejected from the S&P 500. At one stage, it was a 91% shoo-in. It was a 91% favorite to be included in the S&P 500. So I will say that's interesting. And to go from a 91% odds-on favorite to a last-minute rug pull, I think that's kind of telling. I think that's kind of interesting. That is what I will say. I could say a lot. I don't want to say too much because the sun's actually out in Lima, and I might go catch up with my boy here, Josh, in the chat. But I'm going to shut up for a minute, and I want to listen to what else Michael said this week following the rejection of MicroStrategy, because I think there could be some clues in what Michael said in this recent interview that I think maybe suggests that he knows something we don't. Let's listen in.
Thing I would tell you to do to ensure that America leads the way in the crypto space, what would you tell him?
I would say he's already done the first thing, which is highlight Bitcoin as a store of value, as digital gold, and put the United States support behind a strategic Bitcoin reserve. The second thing is to support the creation in law of a legitimate path for issuers in the United States to issue digital tokens, digital securities, and digital currency. Because if American companies can create those digital assets, we will become bankers to the world.
What does the future look like to you with Bitcoin, with cryptocurrency in general? Where do you see it 5, 10, or even 100 years from now?
I think big tech is going to embrace Bitcoin. They're going to let you hold your Bitcoin on your iPhone, on your Android phone. It will find its way into Microsoft software, Amazon software, Google, Apple software. I think that banks are going to embrace Bitcoin. So your bank's going to give you a loan against your Bitcoin. It'll buy Bitcoin for you. Insurance companies will start to support Bitcoin. I think families will increasingly begin to see it as their savings account. The yoga studio, the restaurant, the hotel chain, they'll be able to raise capital in order to improve their business and to innovate. And I think that sound money, that will spread through South America, Africa, Asia. It'll tread to China. So I think the future is American values, American technology, not just making America great, but also spreading economic prosperity to the entire world.
Well, Michael Saylor, I want to say thank you. Thanks for breaking it down for us.
He did break a lot of things down, but I'm most interested about this line here where he's talking about you'll be able to own Bitcoin on your mobile phone. Again, a lot of people have been speculating. When is Apple? When is Microsoft? When are these giants in the tech space going to be forced to respond to Bitcoin's undeniable rise? And again, MicroStrategy's undeniable rise, because right now there is absolutely no denying that MicroStrategy right now is one of the hottest companies in the entire world. Again, this goes back to our point. Kind of wild that MicroStrategy gets rejected from the S&P 500 when you look at the receipts and you can see Strategy's got right now it's actually the 8th largest treasury in the entire world. I talk about this chart all the time, but there is 500 companies in the S&P 500 and Strategy has got more cash, more money on the balance sheet than over 490 of these different companies. That's massive. And they also turned a bigger profit than over 490 companies last quarter in Q2 2025 with $10 billion of profit for that quarter. And still, AppLovin gets included into the S&P 500 before MicroStrategy. Just another one of those things that really makes you scratch the very limited hairs on your chin and say, I wonder why. Is there something different sneaky or hairy going on here with MicroStrategy. I tend to think I think there's some interesting comments here made by JP Morgan literally this morning following this rejection of MicroStrategy. So let's take a little bit of a look. So JP Morgan analysts have said that this is a massive blow to crypto treasuries. The rejection is a setback not only for strategy, but also a wave of the new Bitcoin treasury companies that have proliferated in recent months. Again, the trend of the new public treasury companies trying to capture this new trend, it is absolutely undeniable. We can see here, let's take a look at my favorite website. It's 189 public companies with Bitcoin on the balance sheet. It's kind of wild when you think about it. Public companies hold 1 million coins, like we said earlier. Strategy's got 638,000. That is the monopoly effect. And when you look at things from a global perspective, I kind of find this chart on the right a little bit interesting. 114 of these Bitcoin treasury companies is in the US, 43 in Canada, 20 in the UK, and then Japan and Hong Kong have got 12 apiece. Maybe there's a little bit of a geographic arbitrage. And what's fascinating as well is the trend is now starting to pick up again. See, we've got 26 new publicly traded companies with Bitcoin on the balance sheet make an announcement that they are now entering this space in the past month. 26 a month, that's nearly one a day. And I've ran the maths previously for you guys. On average, these companies are holding 6,000 Bitcoin. So if we get one new publicly traded company every single day, and if they want to buy 6,000 Bitcoin, what does that do to the supply suffocation? It's 450 Bitcoin mined a day. 6,000 Bitcoin ripped off the market every day. Again, these publicly traded companies, I get it. They take a little while to get to that average number of 6,000 Bitcoin on the balance sheet. But again, I think this is a pretty fair comparison. Every day, we're watching somebody come into the market and rip 12 to 13 times the daily new supply of Bitcoin that gets mined, it's gone. 12 to 13 times of that new supply is gone every single day. I think this is, for me, this is why I get so bullish, because I think this is why I think we're going to continue to see this trend accelerate to the downside. It's not going to slow down. It's only going to increase. People are only going to want to buy Bitcoin. As Michael said in that clip I just played for you guys, eventually you're going to have Apple embrace Bitcoin on the iPhone. It's going to be easier than ever to buy. And it's going to be the obvious choice by such a large margin that we are going to hit that exponential point on the S curve when Bitcoin really starts to go parabolic. Now, again, I think this idea of MicroStrategy becoming a larger and a larger percentage of the Bitcoin treasury company play, I think it's an interesting one. I think it's a very interesting one. I think it's going to become a honeypot. I think it's just naturally going to become a bigger and a bigger target, whether that be from adversaries internationally or whether that be from a US government itself who wants to get their hands on some Bitcoin because it then becomes a national threat. Again, it sounds crazy, but the US government did it in 1933. The US government has done a lot of crazy things. What date is it? I'm going to be careful what I say, but I think a lot of people, they think it's impossible that a new company would get 6102'd. They don't think it's possible. All I'm going to say is be very careful if you are buying MicroStrategy. I wouldn't be trusting any publicly traded company, any ETF with your Bitcoin. I always tell you guys that if you don't have one of these, if you don't have your Bitcoin in a hardware wallet, at least the very large majority of your net worth in a hardware wallet, I think you're personally crazy. I like Ledgers and Trezors. Both companies are more than 12 years old. Both companies have touch screens, which mitigate against some of the recent attacks we saw recently. Again, if you want to get your hands on some of these hardware wallets, I love Ledger and Trezor. I think they're both very user-friendly Bitcoin hardware wallets. This is so important. Again, I've got my hands on all the hardware wallets. They're all great. They all have their own perks and their own advantages. But again, I think usability is a big one that a lot of people overmiss. I've been in Bitcoin 8 years. People, from my experience, just have an easier time with ledgers and Trezors. Bitboxes are also easy to use as well. Super easy to use. So again, if you do want to get your hands on a ledger, they're a partner of the channel. If you use the link down below, they're going to give you $10 of free Bitcoin. If you buy any of these hardware wallets, highly recommend you check them out. Another partner of the channel is Trezor. Trezor is also another great hardware wallet option. They've been around for over a decade. They're also going to give you 5% off if you use promo code Luke. It's L-U-K-E, capital letters. You can't forget it. It rhymes with puke. L-U-K-E. Take advantage of that. And hey, I mean, there is no excuse to not get your Bitcoin on a hardware wallet these days, because the Trezor Model 1, the old school hardware wallets, they're going for 24 euros. Go get your hands on them. I think they're an absolute no-brainer. And I think especially as we do continue to see these centralization attacks in the Bitcoin space, I think Bitcoin in cold storage is the only solution. CJ in the chat says the same thing. Just buy sats and hold it in cold storage. No stocks, no trading, no leverage. It's not complicated. I don't understand why there are so many regards out there who try to complicate things. I agree, my friend. There's a lot of stock trading and stock promoting YouTube channels out there. Douglas, just for the record, certainly not paid to talk trash about MicroStrategy. I've met the man. I've interviewed Michael Saylor. I think he's a genius. I think he will become the world's richest man on the planet. If I were to show you something, I want to show you a quick little article on Michael Saylor's flywheel and his Bitcoin strategy that I think has been underrated for a long time. I wrote this article on Michael Saylor in March 2024. Michael Saylor stole the 1924 playbook of Germany's richest man. In this book, in this article, it could nearly be a book. It was a long one. I essentially lined out the thesis that we're in a currency transition today, and Michael is going to become the world's richest man. And at the time, you can see, look at that big highlighter. Michael held about 120,000 Bitcoin when I started writing this article. By the time I finished, he had 190,000, which is less than 1% of the Bitcoin supply. And I was saying the dude's going to become the world's richest man. So if you want to read that article, you can check it out. I think he's a genius. I'm certainly not paid to talk trash against Michael Saylor. I just genuinely believe that you shouldn't have a large majority of your net worth in a stock. From day one of this channel, I've told you, buy Bitcoin, put it into a hardware wallet, take it offline, and protect your Bitcoin the way it deserves to be protected. I think Michael's a genius. Again, I don't think you'd be a genius if you had your Bitcoin 12 or 24 words written down on something like this. This is paper. It's actually my productivity hack, but it's paper. And a lot of people write down their Bitcoin 12 or 24 words on something like this. And I always tell you, this, it can be ripped very easily. It can break very easily. Paper does not survive fire, floods, hurricanes. That's why I only put my Bitcoin 12 or 24 words on titanium. I think these titanium plates should be the industry standard when it comes to Bitcoin storage. So again, I always tell you, if you're going to buy a hardware wallet, you may as well also go and buy some titanium plates from Stampseed. You can get 15% off anything you want to buy from Stampseed with a promo code Luke15. So check them out at the link down below as well. Now, something I want to check out with you guys is I want to check in on where MicroStrategy is right now. We're at $320 a share. so many people are worried. So many people, I've got a lot of friends who are irresponsibly long MicroStrategy, and they're always asking me my opinion on it, which is why I make so many videos on MicroStrategy. Again, I think long-term, it's going to become the richest company in the world. It's going to get there. It is just reality. It's economic reality. It's all because he has a moat. He cannot be overtaken. If you look at some of the most valuable companies in the world with more money on their balance sheet and treasury than strategy, only one of them has a founder or a leader that has a majority control over the voting shares of that company. And that's Meta. That's Mark Zuckerberg, the man who, if you didn't know, had a goat named Bitcoin and Max. Kind of interesting, don't you think? Well, even if good old friend Zuckerberg wanted to make that play, he is running out of time, because as you can see, strategy is about to overtake him when it comes to how much money is on the balance sheet. So again, I think it's never been more evident today that Bitcoin in cold storage is the only solution. Again, this week, it's a horrible week. I alluded to it a few minutes ago. It's September 11. Obviously, my heart goes out to everybody affected with that. And obviously, this week, we've seen horrific events all around the world. I'm going to be really careful with what I say. I don't know what I can and can't say. All I can say is that I stand behind anybody who speaks their mind and speaks freedom and is not afraid to talk about the truth. That's what we do on this YouTube channel. I've got a lot of very unpopular opinions. So again, rest in peace, Charlie Kirk. I think I need to be, again, careful with what I say here, but I think just this event over the past 24 hours just highlights more than ever where we are in the world right now. We are in the fourth turning. I don't think that's debatable anymore. We're in a very turbulent time when it comes to culture and civilization. The divide between the left and right has never been bigger. And a lot of people are surprised. They see events like these and their knee-jerk reaction is to get caught up with emotions, because obviously it's horrific. Don't get me wrong. It's horrible. I get it. I've seen all the videos. All the videos that have happened this week with both events. It's horrific. Even what happened with Trump earlier in the year. Again, it is absolutely horrific. There's a reason why I'm in Bitcoin. Demonetizes violence. I'm not okay with my tax money being used to fight wars in the Middle East. But again, those who speak truth during times like these, they get hated. Let's go for a couple of my favorite quotes from my book, 1984, my favorite book. The further a society drifts from the truth, the more it will hate those who speak it. It's George Orwell, the 1970s and the 1980s. In a time of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. I don't think those two quotes could sum up the life of Charlie Kirk better than anything I could say. Again, I didn't want to do a full hour-long live stream on that topic. You've probably seen all the videos. Everybody's made videos on it. But again, I just wanted to say, rest in peace, Charlie. I think it's absolutely horrific what has happened. I've learned a ton from him over the years. Probably watched hundreds of his interviews. The guy was over the target. And I think what happened this week shows that we are over the target. And again, think about the timing of all of these events. I always like to bring different perspectives on topics. A lot of people get caught up in the emotional side of events. But again, why are both of these events happening this week? Again, today is September 11. Like I said, my heart goes out to everybody affected by that horrific event. But why now? I don't know. I mean, the Fed is supposed to cut interest rates pretty aggressively here in at the next Fed meeting. They wouldn't be cutting rates if everything was hunky-dory, would they? Who knows? Could all be a coincidence. Certainly could be, but I'm always just going to encourage you guys to keep your eyes on the prize. As George said in our recent interview, stay frosty out there. Keep your head on a swivel. zoom out. When you do zoom out and you realize we're in a fourth turning, a lot of the craziness in the world begins to make a lot more sense. And obviously that's why we're in Bitcoin. Bitcoin is freedom. And at the end of the day, I've been black-pilled in 2020. Gosh, was I black-pilled. I came to the realization pretty quickly. Hang on a minute. Giving negative events a lot of energy, it doesn't serve anyone, really, unless you're helping to build that new system. Because the only way we can tear down that old, horrific system that does horrific things is by building a new system. So again, I always like to encourage people during times like these, yes, highlight the problem. It's horrific that things like this happen. But what is the solution? Guide people towards the solution. Why did this happen? Because he was speaking truth. People do not like the truth, as we covered with these quotes. In a time of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. And the further society drifts from the truth, the more it will hate those who speak it. We're in a fourth turning. Every 90 years, when we're in these fourth turnings, our world is more disconnected from truth and rationality, not just in economics. The whole world. Think about 2020. People lost their minds. They couldn't look at clear statistics. They lost their minds. Again, it's a live stream. I'm going to try to not let myself say anything too crazy here. All I'm going to say is that I'm glad to have platforms like this where I can talk to 1,041 of you guys on a live stream on a Thursday afternoon and connect with like-minded people. I was talking to my boy Francis about this earlier. We're in a fourth turning. We're in an economic transition. We've not only never seen a global fourth turning before, but we've also never seen a global monetary transition or hyperinflationary event happen before in our lives. Francis and I were talking about the similarities that we see today with, let's say, the German hyperinflation in the 1920s. The same cultural phenomena that we're told is normal and progressive and welcoming. We saw the same things in the 1920s. I think a lot of the things that we're told and that we brainwash our kids into thinking is normal, it's not normal. It's only a byproduct of the times that we're living in. And again, this is the really dangerous thing about these 90-year fourth turning cycles. Most of us are 50, 60, 70 years old. We weren't around for the end of the last cycle. This is why the fourth turning, this 90-year political cycle, continues to repeat itself. It's human nature. We forget about how the weak men created the hard times. Comments in the chat are electric. All I'm going to say, guys, is it's been a sad week. Again, condolences to everyone whose friends and family have been caught up in it. But again, let's stay focused on the solutions. Use moments like these to educate people on the solutions. Thank the Lord we've got Bitcoin. If we didn't have Bitcoin, boy, would I be black-pilled right now. I would be very black-pilled. I'm glad we got Bitcoin. I'm glad we have technology. I'm glad we have solutions. I love that Bitcoin gives us financial sovereignty. Actually, I'm also glad that we have the internet and technology is, where it is today. I can work from anywhere around the world. I haven't had to go and live or step foot in my gulag of a country, Australia, for 4 years because the technology is where it is today. Now, again, I talk about just Bitcoin on this channel. If you guys also want to learn about how you can increase your sovereignty in the geographic realm of things, so if you want to learn how you can decrease your taxes or get a second citizenship or pop a baby out in another country and get a free passport, I talk about all of that and more on my traveling YouTube channel. That's called The Digital Fugitive. I am a little bit of a fugitive. So again, if you guys are not subscribed to that, highly encourage you guys to go and check it out. We've done 72-hour challenges, living only on Bitcoin in Costa Rica, the world's most underrated digital nomad hotspot. Yesterday, I published a video where we traveled to the world's best restaurant in the world. I nearly got altitude sickness traveling there. That's the story in and of itself. So go and check that video out, check that channel out. I've linked it down below in the description if you're interested in that kind of content. And what I say, guys, I might end today's show here. I made it through the stream without saying anything too spicy. That's a success. I will say thank you to everyone who tuned in. Today was a little bit of a different one. I think it was much needed. And what I say, guys, I'll see you all in the next video.